Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about the IL or injured list within MLB The Show 23 and MLB The Show in general. I wanted to cover how you utilize the IL because it is a little bit more complex with baseball than it is in other games, especially when you consider how many levels of your organization you have and the fact that you can have players from multiple levels of your organization on multiple different injured lists that are available for you and what those injured lists actually do for you within franchise mode. So to get right into it, let's talk about the different injured lists that are actually available to you and how to get to it. So first, you're going to need to go into franchise mode and you go to the top right hand corner where you take a look at that MLB logo. Whenever you click on the MLB logo, you'll then be able to scroll down to injured list. You're also going to get pop-ups as you advance through the season and simulations occur and injuries occur through those simulations or they occur in game that are going to prompt you to put players on one of these injured lists, especially based on their injury time. There are two important columns here to compare whenever you're determining which injured list you want to put your player on and how long that player is going to be out for your organization. So again, talking about the different injured lists, you just simply have the bench, you have 10-day IL, 15-day IL, and 60-day IL. These are actually pretty straightforward as to what they're going to do for you. If you don't want to clear a roster spot, meaning you want a player that has a minor injury to just sit on the bench for a bit, you're not going to put them on the 10-day, 15-day, or 60-day injured list. In fact, sometimes you can even select options that don't allow that player to be benched at all. That just sometimes makes them inactive, sometimes allows them to wait until their next start as a starting pitcher, for example, and they'll be ready to go. But again, what you can do is you can put these players on one of these injured lists, as I mentioned earlier, to clear a roster spot. And so what that means for you is much like in other sports and other sports titles in the gaming market, you're able to put these players on the injured list or injured reserve in order to free up a roster spot to replace them. So as an example, in our Pirates franchise, Leody Taveras was injured with a torn MCL. He's pretty much going to be out for the remainder of the season, and you don't want that player just taking up one of your 26 roster spots, and therefore you can put him on the injured list to then call a player up in his spot. So if I took Leody Taveras not being on the IL and put him on the IL, I would then go down from 26 out of 26 players in the MLB to 25 out of 26 players in the MLB, which would then allow me to call up an additional player to the majors to replace this guy. The same thing is exactly how it operates with the 10-day and the 15-day IL. They're just different designations, and those players can't come off the IL until they've spent that amount of time on that injured list. So Leody Taveras is going to have to spend a minimum of 60 days on that injured list. Mitch Estrella is going to have to spend a minimum of 15 days on that list. Malcolm Nunez, 10 days on that list. And that's where you start to get into the comparison between their injury time and the list time left, which is extremely important, and generally speaking, just the list time as a whole. So one quick example is Jack Sawinski, who has a strained tricep. His injury is going to last anywhere between 1 and 6 days, as you can see in the estimated injury time category. So with that being said, would I want to put him on an injured list that's going to keep him out for 10 days, 15 days, or 60 days? No, generally speaking, that's not going to be something that's going to be beneficial because that means he's going to miss out on a minimum of 4 days of playing time that he could be playing. Could even be 9 days of playing time if his strained tricep is good to go in 1 day. Likewise, you have to kind of consider exactly what's going on with different players. So you'll get a lot of 1 to 2 week injuries like Malcolm Nunez, which is going to be 7 to 14 days. Well, again, that's just below that 15-day IL time frame, and so that player might be more better off being put on either the 10-day DL or just not put on the IL at all. Again, you can free up a roster spot by putting them on the 10-day, but because it's a maximum of 14 days, you probably don't want to have them sit out for 15 days on the 15-day IL. Mitch Estrella is kind of the opposite example, where this is a guy that has a head fracture pitcher that's going to be out 5 to 6 months. It does not make a whole lot of sense that he is sitting here on the 15-day injured list. He's not going to come back in 15 days, so I might as well just designate him for the 60-day injured list and clear up that space for as long as possible. Then, again, you get the column on the right side, which is their list time left. And I just wanted to insert this little tidbit here to let you guys know that that list time that you see on the right side can very often be much higher than the required amount of time that they spend on the list. So as you see us going through the video, you probably see that these players have like a 170-day list time in comparison to it just being a 60-day DL. That is more linked to the player's actual injury length as opposed to being linked to a specific amount of time they have to spend on that injured list. So if I put somebody on the 60-day IL, they're going to have to spend 60 days on that IL before I really do anything with them. But after that 60 days, it might still say that they have 100 and some days left on the list. That's basically just saying the amount of time until you can actually utilize that player again when their injury is done, when their injury is complete. So it's saying that it is a list time left is not necessarily the way I would have phrased it. I would have phrased it as remaining injury time, but it kind of, if you think about it, makes a little bit of sense in the fact that they're going to have to stay on that list until that injury is recovered from, and so therefore it is still their time left on the list. It's just not time required to be on the list, if that makes sense. After a certain point, you can move that player off the list all you want, even though they're still injured, so just keep that in mind. So you could end up with a player that has a day or two left on their injury, but has, say, 10 days or 9 days left on their injured list. That means that despite them being ready to go earlier, they still have to serve those extra days on the injured list before they can be taken off the list. Another thing to note here is that you can always move guys to the 60-day IL who are on the other injured lists. So, for example, Jack Sawinski, even though he is only a strained tricep and is not technically on an injured list, can go to the 10 or 60-day IL. You have a guy like Mitch Estrella, who I talked about, who should be on the 60-day IL, so I'm going to move him to the 60-day injured list. And again, he's going to be out for 5 to 6 months, so he might as well stay on that 60-day injured list for us. And that's going to help us out in the long run, just keeping that spot clear so that I can then bring somebody up in his spot. So again, I have a bunch of injuries here. It's actually quite handy that I have various different injury lengths, but you're always going to be kind of making a judgment on your own of whether that player should be going on a specific injured list, whether you want to wait for them to come back and not put them on an injured list, and if you have a player that can even take their spot on the major league roster and help you out in that time that they have remaining on the injured list. Now, the other thing to consider here is that you can move these players around pretty much at will in comparison to other games. I can take any of these players and activate them, and it's going to change my roster composition. So as you can see, I'm at 26, 26, and 26. My roster is full at each level. But if I go to my injured list and, for example, I activate Malcolm Nunez, move him to the active list, Mitch Estrella, activate him, and Leody Taveras, activate him, and then go back to my roster, you'll now see that things are a little bit messed up. So Leody Taveras is now taking up a roster spot on my major league roster, and those other two are taking up a spot on my AA roster. And again, I don't want to give any misinformation, so when you sim forward, it is going to, if you move these guys around, force you to keep them on whatever list you set them on for a designated amount of time. Whenever I hit 29 days on each of these players, I'll then be able to move them around again. But as you can see, if I click into these players again, having simmed forward a couple of weeks, it's still not letting me move them back to any of the other injured lists. So you do kind of want to be careful as to what you're doing here. You want to take a second to think about what is their injury time and which list should they go on, but nonetheless, it's a very helpful tool, something that you will want to utilize, moving these players to different injured lists to be able to free up roster space so you can continue to field a full roster as you progress through your season in franchise mode. Injuries are bound to happen. You're going to have to fill in those spots, so I recommend that you at least have a surface level knowledge of what's going on with your IL. You can certainly auto all of this stuff, and it does a decent decent job of autoing it. But again, there will be players that just don't make sense that are put on certain injured lists if you do auto all of your injury management. So just reloading back to the beginning here, I just wanted to show you guys once again that we were taking a look at Mitch Estrella, who has a 5 to 6 month injury that was placed on the 15-day IL. That's going to cause you to again have another pop-up at some point that's asking you whether you want to put him in a certain IL or activate him or this, that, and the other thing. It would just be better to plop him on the 60-day injured list from the get-go, and that's something that happened through the system automatically putting him on the 15-day IL. So again, like I said, you just want to have a surface level knowledge of what's going on here and how to utilize it, and I hope that this video has been helpful in that way for you. If it was, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.